Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. This week, we have the pleasure of bringing back friend of the show, Sean Wheelock, voice of BKFC and just about every other MMA event that doesn't start with the UFC acronym. Sean, welcome back, my friend.
Matthew, Ed, hey, thanks, guys. Great to be back with you. I had a blast last time. Really looking forward to this again. Thank you.
Yeah. First, I got to tell you, so much gratitude that you keep returning to the podcast from me. One of the things that I've been mentioning a lot since the last time you were on, because you said something that stuck with me, and with everything going on in the fight business right now, especially when it comes to MMA, and people not doing so well or organizations not doing so well. One thing you said to us was, how well someone is doing when they keep putting on events.
That's the metric. I'm telling you, that is the number one metric in our industry. Look at shows year to date.
And to underline that point, BKFC has been going full steam ahead. They don't screw around with any shenanigans. It's just, people try to bait Feldman, they were comparing it to UFC or anything else, and it's just it's a testament to just sticking to it, to paying attention to your own backyard and growing your own business. And you've been along for that ride. And I just wanted to say that, I've learned so much from you the last time that you were on, and your point holds true with the organization you're working with. So congratulations to all the success that you guys have had.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And, that about shows year to date, that's kind of something that just came to me. And I thought that really is the metric, because you hear promotions say we did this or we did that, or we're looking to do this or projecting. But really, in the COVID, 18-month period threw it off a little bit. But pre-COVID, post-COVID, look at what a show has done. And then are they doing the same number of shows? Are they doing more, or are they doing less? The UFC consistently, without the Ultimate Fighter, without Contender Series, they're right around 42 to 46. That number doesn't really fluctuate. That's pretty much been their standard since they had their ESPN deal. It'll be interesting to see if they add more shows. It's not going to be less if they had more shows when they get their new TV deal or TV deals in the next 16 coming up for 2026. But, I think of my own experience with BKFC. We started with 3 shows in 2 states in 2018. Last year, we did 31 shows in 6 countries. I was speaking to David Feldman yesterday. I believe our projection is 44 shows this year in 7 or 8 countries.
To kind of piggyback off what Ed said about events being scheduled, as somebody who's made their whole world of MMA going and attending events, and purchasing tickets and monitoring ticket sales and really having a good idea of how things go when it comes to that kind of stuff. I'm noticing, as somebody who takes a lot of people to the fights over the last 25 years, BKFC is kind of getting in a rare territory where when I say, do you want to go to BKFC? People don't go, who's fighting?
Right.
People go, yes. And I had 9 people at the last show, and 7 or 8 times, and it's obviously easier for me when it's local in California here, but it's kind of in UFC territory at this point, and not in the big fish of the UFC yet, but where your name is selling the product. And that's something that obviously you don't want to, I don't like how the UFC gets away from their stars. I feel like that's where the BKFC is doing great, is that they're selling off the name, but they're also not afraid to promote these guys. I see Paul Amino gets a fight. Right. I just announced. I know Hunt has some stuff that came up today, but he's looking like he's going to have a rematch with Camozzi in Italy in a couple months. These are all names. Even Camozzi's got the MMA name behind him, and now he's got a title belt with you guys. It just seems like you guys are doing a really good tightrope of walking. We're BKFC, but we're not afraid to have Eddie Alvarez. We're not afraid to let Mike Perry kind of be the face of our organization. And I think that works well for building stars for the future, along with just building the brand and making it a real viable something that people want to consume and pay for.
Yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. I think we do it correctly. And also, when we go into a city like Philadelphia, on the undercard through the midcard, we're going to have a lot of Philly kids. You know, when we make our debut in a state like California, as we did in April of last year on Knucklemania 4, we had a lot of Southern California guys on there. So we will have BKFC debuters, and they will be regional guys, or we will have guys specific that we've maybe only fought once or twice, but they're going to be specific. So we have that in Montana, we have that in Kansas City, we have that in Omaha, California. We're seeing that at Mohegan Sun. I really like what you were saying about selling off of the promotion, because right now in the fight world, outside of BKFC, the only company, and I mean the only company that is selling tickets based on the promotion before any fights are added or announced is the UFC. You know, the UFC could come to Kansas City. They could announce tomorrow. They're not, but Kansas City, where I live, and say we're coming. They'll sell, 10 to 14,000 tickets immediately. And then they'll probably sell the remaining 4,000 or 5,000. I'm assuming they would play T-Mobile Center. So they would then sell the remaining 4 or 5 based on the main event. Do they have some of the maybe Kansas City UFC guys on there? Maybe some of the regional UFC guys around Kansas City from Oklahoma or Nebraska, Iowa, Missouri. But they're selling the core of those tickets going in. We're starting to do that. You know, I think like I'm a big NFL fan. I'm a bigger fight fan, but I'm a big NFL fan. If the NFL announced in 2026, we're going to play and name a random city, Wichita, Kansas, San Antonio, Texas, Albany, New York, Sacramento, California, they're probably going to sell that stadium 80% out before they even announce who the teams are, because the brand means so much. And no disrespect to Bellator. You guys know I was in Bellator for 5.5 years. I adored it when I worked for Bjorn Redney. Not as much as I do working for David Feldman at BKFC, but I just had a great time working for Bjorn Redney when he owned Bellator. He's still a good friend of mine to this day. We talk all the time. But I did 127 Bellators. I would tell you that maybe 4 sold more than 4,000 tickets. And I think our last 4 BKFCs have sold more than 4,000 tickets. You know, I never felt with Bellator that we were selling because of Bellator. We started and we were selling because of all the prelim local ticket sellers that you never saw on our 4-fight broadcast on Fox Sports Net and then MTV2. By the time we got to Spike with Bellator, it was, all right, we have Tito Ortiz versus Stephan Bonner. We have Ken Shamrock versus Kimbo Slice. We have King Mo Lawal versus Quentin Rampage Jackson. But I don't know that anybody was saying, hey, Bellator's in town. Let's go see Bellator. Maybe when we played WinStar World Casino north of Dallas in Thackerville, Oklahoma, maybe a little bit. Maybe Pechanga Casino, which is now happily a BKFC venue in Temecula, California, east of LA. But I never really felt like anybody was buying because of the brand. I know without question that people are buying BKFC because of the brand. And that is so cool and that is so satisfying to me.
Talking about where you hold events, you know, you just had the Mohegan Sun one with Brendan Ward on the card. Do you know, I mean, usually that's kind of, I always say that's Brendan Ward's house because every time he fights there. So did you get the sense that when that was the case for that event, and what was the crowd like as you know, from all the, because you guys have been on a roll, like it was like 4 Saturdays in a row, right?
Right. That's right. Yeah, the crowd was amazing. Mohegan, I believe my 3rd Bellator, April or May 2010 would have been my 3rd or 4th Bellator, and we were at Mohegan Sun. I believe it was May 2010. And I fell in love with that building. Mike Mazzulli, who's the head of the Mohegan Commission, he's the president of the Association of Boxing Commissions and Combative Sports, really good friend of mine. I love going to Mohegan. It is just such a great venue, a great time. I've been there over 20 times now. Our crowd was great. They were loud. I was saying to Crystal afterwards, man, we're jaded. We have over 7,000 people at Mohegan. They were crazy loud. And we're thinking, we sold 18,000 last week in Philadelphia. But We had it packed at Mohegan. I know we're going back relatively soon. It made sense, and this is where BKFC is so smart, and where David Feldman is so smart to me. We signed Brennan Ward, so why not fight Brennan Ward in the building where we know he's going to sell the most tickets? Brennan Ward is an amazing fighter. He's going to be a great fighter for us, and someone I really liked a lot in Bellator, and we had so much fun catching up, speaking off air, and I just think he's a phenomenal person, a phenomenal fighter. And he beat James Dennis, who came in 2-1 on 2 straight wins. So it was no A-side, B-side squash set up for Brennan Ward. He got a tough guy, and Brennan Ward was phenomenal. But this is where David Feldman, to me, is so smart. BKFC is so smart as an organization. We signed Brennan Ward. Why would we not fight him at Mohegan? That makes perfect sense. So we're doing that really smart, I think, strategic matchmaking, where we have these top guys, but then let's maximize. Let's have Eddie Alvarez fight in Philadelphia as opposed to California. Let's have Brennan Ward fight at Mohegan as opposed to putting him on an Oklahoma. All of that just continues to build and build. And the fact that we're at Mohegan Sun, that's such validation for me. It's one of the absolute elite commissions, elite fight venues in the country, in California, in Pennsylvania now, thanks to Ed Kunkel, who replaced Greg Serb as the head of the Athletic Commission in Pennsylvania, welcoming us in. People are being open-minded. They're seeing what we do as a sport, and the commissions continue to open up for us.
I'm making another quick little comparison to Bellator. I know not to harp on the past too much, but when Bellator came to light for a ticket buyer like me, again, this is how it was the Lesnar era. You had the Lesnar pop in UFC when all of a sudden prices jumped, let's just say $100 a ticket across the board. Bellator came around, and as a consumer, you had all of a sudden I could go to these and I could afford to go to them and I could sit close. I couldn't sit like that in the UFC anymore. You fast forward now to, when was the debut of BKFC 1? 2017? 2018?
June 2nd, 2018.
Okay, so you're right off the Conor hype. When UFC prices now have just gone to another level. Now BKFC opens up the door. While it's not MMA, you have another event now. When it comes to people's towns, they can go watch a combat sport and not have to spend their mortgage to go. Now, and I think that opens the door for allowing the growth at a right time, because while the UFC is thriving right now, it's a 1%er thing. I mean, I get to go a couple times a year, but it's not, you can't afford to go to it. I go to the BKFC Pachanga, and for what it costs me to get into the door of a UFC event, I can sit second row. And I'm immersed in the event. You know what I mean?
And you guys know I'm a massive UFC fan. You know, there's that strain of hardcores who watches every single UFC fight, and I'm in that strain, as I think the two of you guys are, and many watching. So this is an observation on the UFC and not a criticism, because I wouldn't criticize the UFC on a single thing. I think, from my perspective, they're like the NFL of the English Premier League. They do everything right. So when I see what they've done with the Apex, and I don't know if they're going to continue that with their new TV deal or deals streaming TV broadcasting in 2026 and beyond. But as you see with the Apex, which I think is genius for them, they're not going to places like Wichita, Kansas, where they came in 2019. It seems like those smaller market, those mid-market cities are going, where the UFC is either doing a major venue, like when they go to Los Angeles. They're playing T-Mobile in Las Vegas, which is their home, and they always sell out. They're playing some major international venues, and then they're doing the Apex. So if you look, so many of those shows were like, if they went to a Milwaukee or Virginia Beach, Wichita, Indianapolis, those have become Apex shows. I don't know what's in their future. I have a lot of friends who fight at the UFC. I have a couple of friends who work for the UFC. I'm not privy to that information. But in the meantime, while they're not focusing on those mid-tier markets, we certainly are. And we're going into those cities. We're also going in the major markets like Philadelphia and Los Angeles, but we're still going to Omaha. We're going to Wichita. And those are the types of markets I think that we're doing extremely well in. as when we go to Philadelphia. And we have the largest crowd for a fight since September 1951, which was Rocky Marciano, Jersey Joe Walcott won. So there's room to go into the major markets, but there are only so many major markets, and you can only keep going to the major markets so often. But I love, maybe because I'm a Midwesterner, probably because I'm a Midwesterner and a Kansas City guy. But when you can go to those mid-tier markets that are still major cities but have populations of, say, 500,000 to 3 million and do really well in those cities.
I got talking about just opening up, other states opening up, because folks remember, you're still on the commission in Kansas, right?
No, I am not. I did 2 terms. I felt like it was the right time for me to exit, as I'm more involved with BKFC, and I'm actively involved with opening up states. That's kind of my behind the scenes. So I did 8 years. It was a guy who I like a lot named Israel Villa took my position. And I felt like in 2 terms and 8 years, I accomplished everything I wanted. I felt like it was the time for me to leave. And there was something to me about, I can't be disingenuous. I don't want to be disingenuous where I'm sitting on a commission, but then I'm pitching commissions. That just didn't fit to me.
So you kind of already jumped into the second part of that question I was going to ask. Because of your commission experience, you're pitching to other commissions. Are there any states that are looking more receptive to bringing it over? Mainly for me, obviously, Jersey, New York is where my interest is because that's where I'm at. Yeah. But I mean, can you speak on anybody that seems to be like who's licking their chops especially after Philadelphia, and saying you guys got to come here?
Yeah, and this is not a rote or a trite answer, but it's everyone is really. It's gone from, it's the same arc that the great Art Davie, when he created the UFC, got to. This is the worst idea I've ever heard, to, okay, we'll consider it, to, yeah, we might go for this, to, when can you come? So it's strategic now with BKFC, because when we were doing this and I started consulting, mainly regulatory, some broadcast, but mainly regulatory for David Feldman, all the way back in July 2016. And 23 months before our debut show. So we were going to any and every state. What we have to be careful of now is we have states, and I'll tell you some of these states: Tennessee, Oklahoma, Oregon, New Hampshire, where we're legal, we can do a show, and we just haven't been able to schedule a show yet. So we want to be careful. It's a major state, like you mentioned, New York, New Jersey, major states, major commissions. If we go and we do whatever we need to do to get finalized, in some cases, it's virtually nothing. In some, it's maybe hiring a lobbyist, like in New York, what the UFC had to do when they were still under Fertitas. It might be going to a commission meeting. It might just be filling out paperwork again. Every state, every commission is different. But we don't want to invest a lot of time, a lot of energy. It's not money, it's time and energy to open up a state if we don't have plans on going to that state immediately. And California is such a great market for us. You see Pennsylvania, Mohegan Sun's major. You know, I'm a Kansas City and I live on the Kansas side. That was my commission. So I'm like, hey, we should be going to Kansas 6 times a year. You know, we had our last Kansas show in August. I don't know when our next Kansas show is. So that's where we have to be careful. If we do 44 shows this year, and I hope we do, I wish we did 144, but if we do 44 shows or 40 or 45, but whatever that is, still there are certain states we want to hit multiple times, multiple cities within that state. So that's where we have to be careful. And we also have to give shows to these states like Oregon and Oklahoma who've opened up for us, and we've not been there yet.
The one state I never hear mentioned, rarely hear mentioned, and it's one state that the UFC stays away from because they claim that there's not a big enough venue without going to the stadium, is Hawaii. My time, I haven't been to Hawaii millions of times, but my times in Hawaii, I'm more an MMA. Every time I'm there, people come up to me. I mean, in the early 2000s, it was people just talking about BJ Penn. I mean, it's a fight. It's a fight state. Blaisdell Arena, I think that's probably still
Oh, yeah.
what it's called. I think it's about 10,000, maybe 11,000-ish. Sounds like it's probably a really good size for you guys. Is Hawaii ever anything, or is it the logistics, or why is it that people stay away from there?
Yeah, so, Bellator and Scott Coker, after they got rid of me, they had a lot of successful shows in Florida. I was never part of that group. I was gone by then. I was gone July of 2015. They really, I think, with Alima Leigh McFarland, really dug in and developed Hawaii and did an extremely good job. I know that they had big crowds, some of their biggest Bellator crowds in that second half of the promotion after I was gone was in Hawaii and Honolulu, Neil Blaisdell Arena. We've never really seriously talked about it, we meaning David Feldman, myself, the executive team, about Hawaii. A lot of it is David Feldman will say, hey, we want to go here, and I'll get to work on opening that state. Or I might say, I think we should go here, or I know this state is receptive, or let's put an effort on this. Obviously it's an expensive place to get to. It's almost like doing an international show. So logistically there are challenges, but I don't know that there's one person on our staff, David Feldman included, who would not love to go to Hawaii. All the way back when I was a soccer commentator in a previous life, I commentated soccer in Hawaii, and I was also there with my wife before we had kids. So I love Hawaii. I would love to go. We have numerous Hawaiians on the roster. It's just a great sports state. It's a great fight state. It's just a great state. The people, the culture, the food, everything about it. It's just nothing that's ever really been discussed. Alaska is another place that we can go to. We've never really seriously talked about Alaska, and I've thought you could go into Alaska. The UFC has never been there. Bellator never went there. I don't think PFL. I don't know, but I don't think they have any design to go there. To me, that's like the type of place you could go and sell out just the fact that they're not really getting other promotions coming in, but it just has never really been discussed. I think a lot of it is just, all right, we have to look at scheduling. We have to look at logistics. And obviously you always have to look at cost.
Yeah. Well, just back to the regulatory side of things. So I saw that you did like a ref rule seminar not too long ago. And is that kind of like part of helping get folks open up to doing BKFC in new places, to kind of get people trained officials so they can kind of spread out and help kind of like already lay the groundwork for you guys already have people that know how to officiate this. It's time to just start bringing the events there.
Yeah, that's part of it. Another part was we had 4 weeks off, and I have a tendency to get a little squirrely when I don't have a show to commentate every week. So I don't know if we've talked about this in the past or if you guys are aware. I started in all this fun when I was 22. I was a pro boxing referee. I was really serious about refereeing when my wife and I were first together long before we had kids. We actually talked about moving to Las Vegas. My broadcasting career got going a little bit in soccer and then in fighting. I refereed less and less to where I stopped refereeing, except on occasional one-offs, really just for fun. But I've been very, very involved, starting with David Feldman, with working with the original rules set. And, I was chairman of MMA Rules and Regs Committee. And I on the original Bare Knuckle Committee, which launched the Unified Rules. So I've always loved the refereeing. You can hear in my commentary. I think I'm one of the few commentators who actually says referee Nick Barons or referee Dan Mergliata, and not just the referee, like it's a nameless person. I'm trying to interpret the rules. That's why I loved my Triller I did the same thing for Triller, but on Netflix with the Tyson Paul Serrano Taylor card, where I was the rules and judging and regulations analyst. So that's a big part of just my interest. Forget my career, just my interest. When we were doing our first show in Utah in 2023, my buddy Scott Bowler, who's the head of that commission, former Lions Den fighter, by the way, was with the Shamrocks. He asked me, would I just do a quick Zoom thing just to get his people ready? I was like, yeah, absolutely. Threw together some videos, put together the course. A few California people attended, word spread. California said, would you do this? Mike Mazzulli, the president of the ABC, attended that one. So quietly, I've been kind of behind the scenes teaching courses as a hired gun for commissions. They've brought me in. I knew I was going to have 4 weeks off. I know that I get a little squirrely when I don't have time. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to maximize this time. I'll do this refs and judges course. I live in Kansas City. I have free labor in the form of my wife and my 2 daughters. We'll put this together. If we can get 40 people, that would be great. I know all my Kansas men and women are going to come. They'll support me. We'll get a few from Nebraska, Iowa, Oklahoma, Missouri. That's probably it. I sold out at 144 people from 35 states plus Canada. And as flattering that is me, that's not me. That's the sport of bare knuckle. And I am fully aware and fully cognizant of that. So, yeah, that made me feel good. And yeah, that's flattering, but I don't kid myself. They were there for bare knuckle. And that people from 35 states came in, and plus Canada, 144 in total. It blew me away. And it's one of those things where you get people together in a room who would never be together. For instance, Jack Reese, who just announced his retirement as a boxing referee. He wants to stay in judging. He wants to judge boxing and bare knuckle. He was there, and so was Nick Barrett, who was in our rotation as, one of our best top guys in BKFC. And I thought, this is so great. We get these people in the room. Mark Colloy, who refereed Tyson Paul, was at that course. Numerous fighters, everyone from Todd Duffy to Jessica Borga took that course. It was an incredible group of people coming together. Fighters, trainers, boxing people, MMA people, Muay Thai people, jiu-jitsu people, all these people coming from all over the country plus Canada because they're really passionate about bare knuckle. And my mantra when I opened up the course was, this is something for everyone. Doesn't matter if you're a 65-year-old guy and you come out of boxing, or if you're a 25-year-old female MMA fighter. There's room for you in the sport of bare knuckle, whatever you want to do that for. And for those 144 people to go out, spread it to their commissions, to their states, their fight communities, it just builds and builds and builds. So while it was a lot of fun for me and I had a lot of personal satisfaction doing it, I think it was great for BKFC, and I think it was great for the sport of bare knuckle.
So to piggyback off that, so when you come to like the state of California with our commission out here, you're dealing with the kind of the big dogs of the commission world, and you're going to get good judges. I mean, not that there's not going to be some bad calls, but you're going to get good judges. You're going to get good referees who usually have experience.
Absolutely.
With and a lot of people see this and just think, oh, it's just bare knuckle boxing. Well, we've went over this with you a million times. It's not. It's its own
bare knuckle fighting.
It's bare knuckle fighting. So there's different rules. There's the clinch rules. Is there when you go to and not to pick on Oklahoma, I've never been to a fight in Oklahoma. Yeah. Actually, they're probably not a good one because Bellator.
No, they're a great fight state actually. Yeah.
So let's just say a random one that Oregon, okay, sure. Oregon, where there hasn't been a ton of fights. When you guys go there, is there a situation where you guys do you go there and be is there meetings with the referees and the commission to make sure? Is there do you get a quick lesson? Or, I mean, how do you know what referees you're getting and who are going to represent your sport correctly? Because in the early days, there was a Houston Alexander fight where he really drilled the guy on the ground. In my mind, I'm thinking that's got to be a DQ. It was a little confusing because he knocked him out before he hit him afterwards.
Against West Combs in Omaha.
Yeah, there you go. Love Houston Alexander, but it was his initial reaction from being an MMA fighter. And I feel like you got to have a referee, especially in this, where there's a lot of danger involved in the bare knuckle. You got to have a referee who really knows what he's doing and to protect everybody. Is there a crash course? How does that work when you go somewhere where maybe you're not confident you're going to get Miragliotta in that ring that night, or your normal crew of guys that kind of been working your shows?
Yeah, it's a phenomenal question. So I love talking about this. So there is a misconception in combat sports that the promotion hires the referees and judges, and that doesn't happen. So whether it's Top Rank Boxing, the UFC, BKFC, you're hired as a referee, judge, inspector, timekeeper, physician by the commission itself. Now, what we followed is what I saw the great Mark Ratner do in the UFC when I was on the Kansas Commission. The UFC has their group of referees who they love and judges who they love, but they're not hiring and they cannot mandate. So the way a guy like Mark Ratner rolls, and you learn from the best, Mark Ratner will say, all right, we're coming to Kansas. Who are you thinking about using? Well, we like Dan Murgliata. Yep, I think that's a great choice. Yep, we'd be very happy with Dan Murgliata. Who else? And then maybe you say someone they don't know. Okay, I'm not that familiar with that person. Okay, all right. Who else? So I'm saying yes or no, they're leading you to a certain way. So as you see, you guys know, as your BKFC hardcores, we have our pool of referees. So that's Dan Murgliata, right? Andy Glenn, Brian Miner is now in that pool. Kerry Hatley, who's getting a good friend of mine. I talked to him earlier today in the UFC. My buddy Nick Barron's fellow Kansas. You're seeing those guys, but then we're also adding in different people. So you go to Utah and you see Dave Salustead. We were in New Mexico. It's Dave Rios. We had Dave Braslow when we were just in Pennsylvania. Kevin McDonald, a great MMA referee, you see him in UFC all the time, had his debut at Mohegan Sun. We had Mike Belch debut on our debut in California. So commissions are working with us just like they do with the UFC in saying these are the guys that we like, but if you want to put on other people. And no commission has forced and said, no, this is my guy. You know, he's a career boxing guy. And he was born and he has to do that. We have not had that. And culturally, that's where the regulatory industry has shifted, because that happened all the time 25 and 30 years ago. Commissions understand that the major promotions want to bring in their people. And it's finding the balance, because I know this having been on a commission, you also don't want to get your people overrun. So the compromise is, hey, who's your best referee in your state that we're going to for the first time? It's person X. Okay, so we'd like to bring in these 3 referees because these guys referee basically every one of our shows. But your guy, how would you feel about if he or she just got 2 prelims? That's the way it works on that. You know, states are generally very receptive. I think the next evolution for us, which the UFC does, is they have their traveling pool of judges. We're just starting to get that, but people coming to my course, I've taught this course now over 20 times. The one in Kansas City, which I put on with my own money, where we had the 144, was the biggest. But I've taught this for the Japanese Mixed Martial Arts Association, Utah, California, Mohegan Sun, Florida, Colorado. I can keep naming states, right? That it's getting out there. And commissions don't want to be embarrassed. Believe me, I'm of an age where when I started refereeing at 22, it was that proverbial good old boy network. It was really who you know and not what you knew. And that's largely gone from regulatory, because whether, again, it's Top Rank or the UFC or PFL or BKFC, these commissions don't want to be embarrassed by putting on bad people. So they're identifying their best people, they're working proactively, and they're trying to put people in a position to succeed. I will tell you, I have never seen what I consider a terrible commission. I've seen very naive and inexperienced commissions, but I've never gone where I think they're terrible. And now there were terrible commissions. Largely, they've been phased out. Most of those people retired.
Yeah.
25 years ago, 30 years ago, there were horrible commissions, just horrible. Yeah. I don't think there's a bad commission in the entire United States. I truly don't. But if you're only doing 1 or 2 shows a year, it's tough. It's really tough. And I'm not saying big shows. I'm saying shows, period. Yeah. So it's if you think about it, if you're a plumber and you only have 2 jobs a year, you're not as good as the guy who's a plumber who's doing 300 jobs a year or 600 jobs a year. And that's the same sort of concept. So just getting the best people, working with the commissions. And again, you know, states like Utah, what Scott Bowler did. Hey, we're new. Sean, would you teach a course? And I was happy to do that for him free of charge. Just getting that out there, getting the experience, bring people in, or they'll say, all right, you're our top MMA ref. You've never done bare knuckle. We need you to sit down with Dan Murgliata and Nick Barron's before a show. But really trying to do the right thing. And that's what I'm seeing. And that's refreshing because, again, when I got into this stuff in my early 20s, that's not how the regulatory industry was by and large.
Yeah, no, it's definitely. I remember it. There's stories from back then out here in Jersey from that long ago me and my instructor remember fondly because my instructor, he was getting people fights, way back when I started, long time ago in 2005. But that's for another podcast. Just to piggyback on something that you said about you guys are starting your traveling pool of judges and stuff because BKFC is going to Australia, right? They announced.
We don't have an Australia date yet. We announced that we're definitely going to Abu Dhabi.
Mhm.
And I beg your pardon, Dubai. We're going to Dubai
Okay.
on April 3rd and 4th, and we're going to Italy on the 25th of April.
Mhm.
And you'll see more international shows. So in a situation like that, too, is that you want to have a regulatory body. So, for instance, when we went to Spain, we used Mike Mazzulli in the Mohegan Sun. When we were just in England last week, we used the ISK. You have to have a regulatory body or you have non-sanctioned fights. That's why you have to have a regulatory body.
Mhm.
And when you have a great regulatory body, they're going to make sure that they're bringing in proper refs and judges, or they're working with the people in that country who are the highest level people. Even if they've not done bare knuckle, have they done major boxing? Have they done the world title fights?
Mhm.
Has the UFC ever been there and they did those shows? Those are the types of people you're looking for.
So, is there an opportunity though? Like, do you have to play? How much more time would you need if you're going to some place to kind of like offer your course to kind of help people in a new area, get learned in the rules and regulations of BKFC or bare knuckle boxing with what you're doing? Like how much time would you need if you were to go to a new place, like a new country or Italy or any of those places, if there's an opportunity to kind of teach them over there versus having to bring people, or the Mohegan Commission, how much time do you think you would need for that?
My course is about 5 hours for refs and 5 hours for judges. It depends on your audience. If you have experienced combat sports people who have worked as professional referees and judges in major organization, professional combat sports, they get it very, very quickly. If you're bringing in a lot of lay people who haven't really been around it, it is a very, very difficult time for them. It's not insurmountable, but it's difficult. But if, for instance, if we went into Italy and they brought me their best MMA and boxing officials, those people are going to be set. They're going to have no problem at all. What I can tell you, though, and if you look at like what we did in Spain, is we're traveling people by and large. And that's where you will see traveling judges too. We might pick up people from in country, but it's not going to be a group of refs and judges you've never seen before. It's absolutely no different than when you see the UFC in a foreign country. You might see like, oh yeah, I see this official, like my buddy Łukasz, the Polish referee. You don't really see Łukasz on many US UFCs. You see him on a lot of European UFCs. So you're still seeing a guy, though, who is very experienced, who's an A+ level ref. So you still are having people within that pool. You just don't want to bring in people who have not done it at that level because it's not easy. It looks easy. It's not easy, believe me. I refereed at a pretty low-level Midwest boxing circuit, and that was tough. So there's a lot of pressure, and you just don't want people to absolutely get sucked up by that moment.
You ever had a situation? This kind of just came to my head. BKFC is not for the faint of heart when it comes to blood, when it comes to cuts. I'm good with that stuff. Broken bones get to me. So I'm okay with the cuts and the blood. You ever had a referee or anybody come to these and it just be too much for them? Like, do you do like a film review or do you do until you see someone's skull right in front of you, I don't know if you really are prepared for that. Now, maybe these.
Yeah, where I've seen that actually is some of the physicians that states have used. And again, these are states that just commissions that just don't have a ton of fights. in my experience, there are three types of docs who make the best fight docs. The ones that deal with the brain, the ones that deal in emergency medicine, the ones that deal with sports medicine.
Mm-hmm.
You get all sorts of things. So you can be a phenomenal family care practitioner, a phenomenal OBGYN, but you maybe just haven't seen lacerations, contusions. We've seen some premature stoppages, and we've also seen fights that probably should have been stopped but weren't, because not that these aren't brilliant doctors and great in their field, they're just not that experienced. You think about it, if you work in an emergency room, you're seeing this type of stuff literally multiple times a shift. If you're in a family care practice, you're not really seeing that. And then you add on it's worldwide television, and there are a lot of people, and a lot of them are yelling, and the fighters are very excited. The corners are excited. I've seen them swallowed up, but I haven't seen any referees or judges. And I think a lot of that, too, is because people know what they are. Even if you've never watched, and I hope you wouldn't be reffing or judging bare knuckle if you've never watched bare knuckle. But even if you have, I think just by the name, Bare Knuckle Fighting Championship, or the sport bare knuckle fighting, will give you a pretty good idea of that. But, you know, you go back 30 years to the mid-1990s when MMA was such a new thing. And right after the UFC, you started to get some smaller shows like Hook and Shoot and Extreme Challenge. And there were definitely people there who had no idea what they were getting themselves. They were largely either people who came from those great martial arts where you can get a black belt, never get punched in the face, or that they were career boxing people. Yeah. But I think, too, just in 30 years, because of broadcast, because of the internet, because of streaming, because of YouTube, Daily Motion, that there's so much more video out there. So it wouldn't be inconceivable that you could be put on a show like Extreme Challenge or Hook and Shoot in 1995 and really have fundamental awareness of MMA. You would hope that that's not the case now with bare knuckle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking more of like when you have these classes or something where somebody wants to get involved. No, I don't know if you have a film course or how any of that works, but I mean, you know, what was it, the Clarissa Seagal and Taylor Starling fight or Sterling fight from a couple years ago? You know, that's it's not easy to look at. You know, I love the sport. It's still not easy to look at. So, I mean, how about a commission? Have you ever went into a room with the commission, put on a tape, and them go, "Oh hell no."
No, you know, we haven't. Those moments really came for David Feldman long before I got involved. And because he had no video to show, it was a lot like what Art Davey was doing with the UFC. It was theoretical, so you're describing. And that's the reaction he had. But early on, we knew the states to go to and the states not to go to. And having been on a commission for 8 years and been around regulatory and been in fighting for a long time, you don't start with California. You don't start with Pennsylvania. You start with states like Kansas and Wyoming and Mississippi. And the reason is because they're not getting major shows. Yeah. You know, it's important to understand that every single athletic commission, there are 47, 3 states don't have them, Alaska, Vermont, and Montana. But 47 states do. All 47 are a part of state government. They're a state governmental agency. They're ultimately under the governor. So if you're California in 2019, why do you need bare knuckle? Why do you have to take the chance? But if you're Kansas, it makes a lot of sense to take the chance. We've had one UFC ever, and that was in 2019. And I don't know when they're coming back. So you have to really go to states that think it's not that they're more open-minded. It's that they're more willing to take the chance. Why are they willing to take the chance? Because I don't have any shows. That's why they're willing to take the chance. Now we're to a point with the sport and specifically with the promotion BKFC. You're not taking a chance on anything. Yeah. We've done 120 shows. We've done 1,200 fights. Yeah. We're selling tickets. We're selling out. So you're not taking a chance with anything. There's no more unknown. You're no more taking a chance with BKFC than you're taking a chance with the UFC. But in 1995, you were taking a chance with UFC. And in 2019, you were taking a chance with BKFC. That's been a huge thing to overcome. Things just get normalized. You know,
Yeah.
I still remember the first time, and I'm somebody who watched UFC 1 live November 12th, 1993. I'm nerdy enough to have a VCR and that original off-air record VHS, not the one that came out from Vidmark Home Entertainment, but I was nerdy enough to put in a VCR tape.
I have it. I have a VCR in my room, and I have the UFC 1.
That's how I watched it.
I have the UFC 1 VHS. I had to go back to confirm for somebody that the Jason DeLuca Trent Jenkins fight was not actually a prelim, but happened before the final of that night.
That's exactly right. Yep, and we can talk about that story at some point. I know the story of that fight, but so of course we're kindred spirits on this, right? So I'm someone who goes back on that to the beginning. And I still remember the first time I saw The Ultimate Fighter on Spike, and it was like, wow, I can't believe that this is just on regular cable television. It was shocking to me. There's no talk now. My kids are 13 and 19. It's no different for them to be able to see the UFC on ESPN than to see the NFL on ESPN. It's just a sport. But there was a normalization that had to happen with MMA, and there was a normalization that has most definitely had to happen with bare knuckle. And it's not just that it's happening. I think it's kind of happened already. And if it hadn't have happened before January 25th when we sold out in Philadelphia, it definitely happened on that night.
So, talking about taking chances, you mentioned it a little bit ago. I put it in my notes here because I was like, this will be fun to ask towards the end of this. I completely forgot that you were on the Netflix Tyson Paul thing. I mean, there were so many people on that doing something. It was just there's so much going on. How did you get called up for that, or was that something you said you wanted to do? Like, how did that all come together for you? Because especially in that role, because you weren't necessarily doing commentary, they just kind of like cut over to you for questions and stuff.
Oh yeah, no, it was a role that we talked about and that I wanted. They reached out to me, but with that being said, Dave Harmon, who's a really good friend of mine, he was the producer for HBO Boxing. He's one of the best absolute fight producers in the world, in the history of fight production. He was the producer. I'm sure Harmon gave them my name. There were a couple of other people who I've worked with on other shows who threw my name, but I was talking to Art Davey and an email. I said, Art, I said, wow, Netflix, I just got an email from Netflix. They're interested in me as a commentator. I was like, that's very cool. I did a similar role. I didn't do a similar role. I did the exact same role on Triller Fight Club, much different show, but on Triller Fight Club. So I had established that I could do that role. And, it's such a weird business being a commentator, because you have to have your work out there, but then people have to see that work. So I don't know for a fact, but I'm sure it was Dave Harmon. He's far too humble to say I'm the one who got it for you, Shawnee. But Harmon, no doubt, maybe a couple of other people mentioned something. I think Nikisa Badarian knew who I was, maybe because I did that role when Jake Paul knocked out Ben Askren on Triller Fight Club. But that was the role that I wanted. And I'm really specific with my play-by-play. Bjorn Rebney let me be me at Bellator. Jerry Millen let me be me at Pride. David Feldman 100% lets me be me at BKFC. On a show like that, and I knew there would be a lot of moving parts and pieces, I would only want to do play-by-play if I felt like they would let me be me. And it's not that they would say you can't say this or can't say that. It's more of we've got to go here, go there, maybe talk to the viewers. Also, look, I don't kid myself. I figured they were probably going to go for someone way better known than me. And they did. They got Mauro Ranallo, who's definitely better known than me. And if it wasn't Mauro Ranallo, I thought, wow, would they go for Ian Eagle or Joe Buck or Al Michaels? I didn't know. So they offered that role to me. I jumped on that role. And truthfully, that's the only role that I wanted on that show. I was thrilled to do that. There was even some talk about me maybe doing play-by-play on the prelims. I was like, man, I'm really happy with this show. I get to do play-by-play every week. So I'm one of these guys who didn't get into this business to be famous. I got into this business because I'm a giant fight nerd who always wanted to do this since I was probably 5 or 6 years old, be a commentator. And so that role was great for me. And if more opportunities come for that, that was fantastic. I will tell you, they treated me so well. They paid me great. They treated me great. The organization, everybody with Netflix was phenomenal. Everybody with MVP from Nikisa Badarian down was phenomenal. It's one of the best experiences of my career. The fact that it was Mike Tyson, the fact that there were 75,000 people made it better.
Yeah.
But honestly, it could have been Jake Paul versus anybody at any ballroom in the country, and I would have had the same great feelings going out of it. And yeah, make no mistake, I know I saw, because people are very kind, and I definitely have my supporters online. Oh, Shawnee, you should have been doing play-by-play. Truthfully, guys, I thought Morrow did great. I think he gave them exactly what Netflix wanted, and I was thrilled in that role. And as I talk about, if I'm going to do play-by-play, I want them to leave me alone and let me be me. They absolutely did that with Netflix. I didn't get any, you need to say this, say that, no notes, no one criticized my scorecard. They left me 100% autonomous to do whatever I wanted. There were times when I knew they were going to throw to me. There were times we have a talkback button in television where I can say to the producer, Dave Harmon, hey, Dave, I have something. It was the headbutt, actually, on Katie Taylor. Hey, Dave, I have something for you on the headbutt. So I loved that experience. And it's funny because, you know, that was a bigger audience than I'm used to commentating for. And wow, the people I went to high school with and grade school and people I knew 25 years ago, they all found me on that night. It was really, really interesting. People who hadn't heard my name since I was a Major League Soccer commentator over 18 years ago. Wow, I didn't even know that guy was still in the business. Crazy. You know, and that's what you get. I think the numbers were, what, 113 million people in 65 million households, or just
something like that.
But it was great. It was such a fun experience. And the week before and the week after, I was doing BKFC, and really I could not be happier. It kind of validated everything that I absolutely love about this industry.
Not quite Netflix level, obviously, with viewers, but I think me and Ed talk about all the time that really helped us grow as fight fans was, you know, coming home after some drinks, maybe in the early 2000s, turning on ESPN late night and there being K1 on. Yeah, I'm starting to notice more stuff with BKFC. I know BYB is, in theory, your guys' competitor, although, you know, not really. But they are on TV, which opens the door to the sport of bare knuckle fighting. And when they're on weird hours between the BN network, and I think that's all a positive. I think the more, you know, you guys are on Fubo, you know, the app, it just seems like you guys are all over the place right now. And, you know, I get people going, hey, is BKFC on tonight? And I'll go, well, who's fighting? And I'll go, no, that was 2 weeks ago, you know, but watch it. It's right. Worth the watch, that kind of thing, you know? And, it's just cool to see that. So I think that's a natural progression, is just being a part of culture, and it just being where you're not, you know, because Bellator had the name that was kind of weird, so people couldn't really fit. You guys aren't sugarcoating what you are. You're the bare knuckle fighting championship. There's no, well, is it MMA? Is it no? We're bare knuckle fighting. It's what you think of fighting when you think of fighting. You know, not, you know, still, you know, ground fighting is obviously real fighting, but when you talk about street fights, you talk about that kind of initial violent fight, it's bare knuckle, stand up, put your dukes up, and that's basically what you guys have been since day one. So I mean, I just love to see the growth of it. I love to see success. Me and Ed talk about, you know, combat sports doesn't need to be cookie cutter. You know, we all came up in a world where there was WEC, there was Pride, there was Strike Force, you had Yama, you had IFL, you had rings, you had cages, you had circular rings with ropes, you had M1s, you know, and IVC's net across the bottom, and, you know, and so you guys bring in a different looking ring with different quote unquote ropes, which is really like PVC essentially, or at least felt like that to me. I don't know exactly what the composite is of it, but it just, everything you guys are doing is a positive. I love the atmosphere. We were all kind of nervous in the beginning because we don't know. You sold me on Feldman. Again, I told you that, you know, wasn't sure in the beginning. I've not heard a bad word about the man from, you know, I've spoke to some of your guys, investors and stuff, just people I've met from traveling on the road at airports. And I try to goat people into saying something bad about the guy, and nobody has, and nobody can, and I don't want to hear anything bad about him. But it's just it's a pleasant. I can't, other than Scott Coker, I can't think of many people in my life who I haven't really heard do a really bad mouth the guy, and I just think everything you guys are doing great. We love to watch it. We support you guys to the hilt. We talk about every show. We really, you just need to get to New Jersey so Ed can start covering the events again easier. All the best.
We are going to be back in Philly on March 21st, and obviously, carte blanche. I'll get you guys hooked up with Bernie, our press officer, and get you guys media credentials and get you set up. And love to see you guys there. And no, I appreciate the support of BKFC, of the sport of bare knuckle and MMA, and then to me personally. So it means a great deal. You guys are massive supporters all across the board, and I'm always happy to do your show. And you guys ask me such really good, smart questions. So thank you.
Cool.
Did you? I mean, I know you said you guys are coming back to Mohegan soon. I mean, I covered so many Bellator events there. Well, do you know when are you allowed to say like how soon? Or
I don't know the exact date. I'm hearing early summer. I don't know the exact date.
That might work.
7,000 people, so it's not going to be long. We want to go back, and they want us back.
Yeah. Well, that's one thing I said to Matt when you guys went there. I was like, there's a void because Bellator used to go there twice a year at least.
Yeah.
And I was like, I said to Matt, I was like, there's a combat sports void, and as you said, the venue at Mohegan Sun it's awesome. It's really good for stuff like that. I mean, it's just great for almost anything. But I haven't been there since Bellator stopped going there, and every time you guys go, I'm like, it's at a bad time of year that I can't get out there. But I always reach out. Like I filled out on the BKFC website because I get press releases from I get stuff from MVP, I get stuff from PFL, and I used to get it regularly from Bellator and Dan Kitchen and all those guys, and I'm like, I filled out the stuff for BKFC, and I'm like, I don't get anything from them. I find out from their socials when you guys are doing stuff, but I'm like, man, I would really like to, I know where to apply if I'm going to go cover it, but I'm just like, I really feel like, I guess everybody's so busy now that they can't really, check their distribution list.
Hit me up off air. I'll get you guys to the right people. Because you absolutely should be getting on those lists, of which we do have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm going to toot my own horn real quick. I want to show you this memorabilia because you can show art.
Yeah, let's see this.
UFC or UFC 2 inside Kung Fu magazine, signed by Hoist Gracie. But here's the kicker. It's to a teenage Drew the Master Fickett subscription.
Wow, look at that. That's crazy. That is crazy. Oh, I love that. I absolutely love that.
What Drew Fickett in 94 had to be 17, 18 years old.
Yeah. That's
pretty awesome though, huh?
It's amazing, and we've talked about my amazing personal relationship with Art Davie, the UFC creator, who I lovingly refer to as my later in life father, with no irony and all sincerity. And how many roads lead back to Art and to UFC 1? It's phenomenal. And I don't know that there was a kid around who watched UFC 1 who didn't love fight films and blood sport and pro wrestling and boxing. But that kind of brought us all together, and that is just such the baseline for so many of us. We were all kind of in the right place at the right age at the right time, and as the UFC exploded, it just revolutionized combat sports to where it really hadn't have been revolutionized since about the 1920s, and it's so amazing. I mean, a lot of the DNA of what Art did when he owned the UFC with Rorion Gracie is what David Feldman is doing in BKFC. And early on, when I was consulting, like in 2016 for Feldman, he said, "Would you put me on the phone with Art?" I go, "Absolutely." I talk to Art every day. And in 2017, the very first tryouts for BKFC at 2300 Arena, where we're doing our March 21st show, open tryouts. Reggie Barnett was there, Travis Thompson, Sam Shoemaker, and Feldman flew Art Davie and myself out there at those tryouts. So there's very much that DNA, that baseline of what we're doing almost more than 3 decades later, actually 31, 32 years later from what Art did for the UFC.
Yeah, that's amazing.
So you nailed my last question. You nailed Mike Perry when he signed
Yep.
with you guys as being a star. I'm kind of looking at a guy like Kai Stewart. I know he's already a champion, but he seems to have the look. He seems to kind of embrace the championship thing. I see him out at shows, sitting there taking pictures, with kids and fans, and seems like he's kind of really embraced it. Not to mention he's talented as hell. Who's the next star? Who's the next guy that who should we watch? Who's don't miss their next fight that maybe is a name that is not Mike Perry?
Yeah, so I mean, Kai Stewart, if you think about Kai Stewart, this is who you need. When you're a new promotion, especially a new sport, new promotion, you need Mike Perry's, meaning you need somebody else's established star to make them a bigger star, and you need Kai Stewart. Kai Stewart, when we found him, he was a junior at the University of Providence in Helena, Montana, and he was on the wrestling team, and he was 1-0 in pro MMA. And he is revolutionizing a lot of things what we do. We're continuing, and this is what I really love. We seem to have these two parallel tracks. We're continuing to find people like Kai Stewart who are not already stars, and in many cases are extremely inexperienced as professional combat sports athletes. But we're also getting fighters coming from the UFC who were not as famous and as popular and as successful as Mike Perry, sometimes through no fault of their own. My buddy Rico DeSciullo, I commentate Combat FC. I still commentate a few other shows. Combat FC I do on UFC Fight Pass. Rico is my broadcast partner there, was on the Ultimate Fighter on Conor McGregor's team on the Conor versus Mike Chandler season. Rico DeSciullo had a phenomenal debut for us, stopped Quentin Foy. That's someone who could break through. Lytle and I talk about this all the time. There are so many really talented fighters between the ages of 25 and 38 who get cut from the UFC. And like Nate Maness. We signed Nate Maness. Nate Maness was on a 2-fight winning streak, and he got cut from the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
And we have Nate in the fighter meeting. Why did you cut? He goes, I have absolutely no idea. Why is Rico DeSciullo, who I think is 13-2 with 1 no contest in his pro MMA career, why isn't he in the UFC? I don't know. Rico doesn't know either. I guess the simple answer is they're a global brand and they only have room for about 660 people. Yeah. So they can't have everybody, right?
Yeah.
Like there are amazing players who aren't on an NFL 53-man roster. It's just the math. So there are so many of those fighters really between the ages of 25 and 38, I think, which is a sweet spot, who have been really good in the UFC and been phenomenal in their pro MMA careers, but for whatever reason, they did not stick in the Ultimate Fighting Championship, and we're welcoming them in. You're going to get people who are stars like Paige Van Zandt, like Mike Perry, Ben Rothwell, absolutely. But then if we can get a Mike Trezano, if we can get a Kevin Kroom, get a Rico DeSciullo, and also then develop people like what we did with Britton Hart, Taylor Starling, Kai Stewart. That's really exciting, and that is the absolute mix for me. Again, I mean, go back to what Art Davie did. Art Davie was finding people you had heard of and people you had never heard of and throwing them all together and taking people who are stars and making them bigger stars and taking complete unknowns and making them big stars.
No, it's awesome. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are got a treadmill of that going right now. So it's again, we couldn't be happy for you guys. I mean, we sound like Homer's talking about it, but man, we just love everything you guys are doing. Like I said, we love the difference and with it. So I think that's going to do it. Thank you for all the information on the commissions and everything else. That's definitely informative. Anything, next show? What's next show you got to promote? Why don't you give us
so February 28th, we're back in Albuquerque, New Mexico. That was an early state for us where we were getting big crowds. Now we kind of expect, we're a little jaded. We expect the big crowds, but Albuquerque early on was one of the first cities we're like, wow, we're selling out. This is crazy. That's such a great, they have Jackson Wink. How could they not be a great fight city, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
absolutely.
So February 28th, we're back in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have the Middle East. We have Europe in April. Back to England, Manchester in the northwest of England on March 29th. Seminole Hard Rock's coming up. I believe we'll be announcing our first Oklahoma fairly soon. It just keeps rolling. So again, you guys are awesome. I'm happy to come on anytime. If you want to hit me up off air, we'll talk about getting you guys credentials. I'll get you to the right people. It's not my department, but I will happily make it my business to get you to the right department, to get you guys out there, get you guys hooked up, get you media passes, get you on the media blast, get all of that.
Awesome. All right. Well, fans can follow the show at Combat Hour on Twitter, Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Used to be able to follow me at MMA Hawk 21. I'm currently being held back from Twitter because I was hacked. So follow Ed at Carbazol on Twitter, Carbeerzol on Instagram, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. Sean, thank you for your time. Much respect, my man, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Guys, thank you so much. Appreciate it as always. Happy to do it anytime.
Awesome. Have a good night.
Thank you. See you.